So once again, we're looking at the extension work here. So this is just applying that extension assignment. If you'd like to see some of the odd number problems worked out, that's what this is for. Okay, let's go through them. I'm going to go pretty quick. Here we go. Starting with this one. Overall, what I see is I'm going to have a fraction. Coefficients is only the 7. As far as x's go, let's take this x, move it down below. So x to the first down below together with this one will make that x to the second. So I've got x to the second and fourth. That's going to be x to the sixth. And as far as y's go, I've got 4 power on top, 1 power on the bottom. So there's an extra 3 that are on the top. That's where that's all coming from. Now for the second, y to the 0 just goes to 1. 5 times 6 is 30. X squared times x to the first is x to the third. And there's just a y that's left over on the bottom. Next up. Here we got a little bit more going on. So let's reduce. 8 times 8 is 64. And 64 divided by 6. I'm just going to, while we get the lights on. So 64 divided by 6. I want a reduced fraction out of that. Okay, that ends up being 32 over 3. Okay. So coming back here then, I'm going to have a fraction with a 32 on the top and a 3 on the bottom. Now let's check our x's. X to the first on the top, x to the third on the bottom. So that means there's an extra 2 x's on the bottom. Now for y's. Okay. I see I've got y to the negative fourth. So that means it's y to the fourth on the bottom. Y to the negative first is y to the first on the bottom. And there's also already a y to the second on the bottom. 4 plus 1 plus 2 is then overall going to be a y to the seventh on the bottom. So there it goes. Next up, let's see what we've got. I've got parentheses to deal with. So 4 to the third power is 64. U to the second to the third power, power to a power, multiply them. So that's going to be u to the sixth. V to the second to the third, that's power to a power, so multiply them. V to the sixth times u to the negative first times v to the negative second. Okay, let's multiply things out here then. U to the sixth, u to the negative 1, add those exponents. V to the sixth, v to the negative 2, add those exponents, and there you go. Next up. Once again, we've got parentheses to deal with, so let's. And because it's a negative, I'm going to also flip things. Well, I take that back. Now, I was going to just flip things upside down and deal with it that way, but I notice I've also got here a negative exponent inside. So tell you what, let's do our power stuff first. I'm going to focus just on this. Down here, let's see what we got. So this would be 3 to the negative second. 3 to that negative second. M, negative 2 times negative 2 would be to the fourth. And n, 2 times negative 2 would be to the negative fourth. Okay, so here's what this is going to give me. 3 to the negative second, that's going to be a 9 on the bottom. M to the fourth can stay on the top. N to the negative fourth is going to become n to the positive fourth on the bottom. Okay, so now all of this is equal to this. Let's put that together with 3 m to the negative fourth. So I'm going to move it to the bottom, make it an m to the positive 4. And the n to the third can stay on top where it is. All right, let's see what we got. The 3 on the top reduces with the 9 on the bottom. So I've got a 1 on the top and a 3 on the bottom. M to the fourth and m to the fourth, those knock each other out of the game. No more m's. And as far as n's go, I've got n to the third on the top, fourth on the bottom. So there's 1 extra n down below. So this whole complicated mess ends up being just that. Fairly simple in the end. Next up. Deal with the parentheses. So 4 to the second power, that's going to be 16. X to the negative third to the second is x to the negative sixth. So that's x to the sixth on the bottom. Y to the third to the second is y to the sixth, and that's times 2y. Okay, so 16 times 2 is 32. Y to the sixth times y to the first is y to the seventh. And then x to the sixth times 1 is just x to the sixth. There it goes. Next up. Woo, now they're starting to get a little feisty. Okay, let's see what we got. Super important just to keep track of what it is you're doing. So I'm looking here, I see u to the 0. Remember, that turns into the number 1, and multiplying by 1 doesn't change anything. So let's deal with just our numbers. So this 8 and that 8 can reduce to 1 and 1. So all that's left is the 4 times the 6. So that's going to be a 24 on the top of our fraction. Next, let's deal with the u's. So I've got u to the first, u to the negative second, and u to the third. That's just a lot to keep track of. So u times u to the negative second over u to the third. Okay, so that's going to be, I'm going to actually make this a u to the positive second down below. So 2 extra u's downstairs is going to give a u to the fifth. Now I've got what? U to the first on the top, u to the fifth on the bottom. That means I've got u to the fourth left over that'll be down below. Okay, so now let's deal with the v's and do something similar. With the v's, I've got v to the negative 3, v to the 3, and v to the 3. Okay, so yeah, a couple of choices. I think probably the easiest, well, one of the easiest would be to say, all right, negative 3 plus 3, because those are multiplied together. On the top, that's just v to the 0. And v to the 0 is the number 1. So what I'm left with is a v to the third on the bottom. There it is. All done. Next up, let's deal with our numbers. So a little bit of mental math here. So I got 8 on the top, on the bottom. 2 times 2 is 4. And 8 divided by 4 is just 2. Now, as far as A's go, and actually, just looking at my A's, I see I'm going to have a lot more A's on the bottom. So my 2 will be left over on the top. But A-wise, I've got a to the third on the top, and on the bottom, a to the fourth times another a to the fourth is going to be a to the eighth. So I've got extra a's on the bottom. How many more? 5 of them. There it goes. Let's keep at it here. Next up, deal with the coefficients. So I've got a 4 and a 2, reduce. So I'm going to have a fraction with a 2 on the top and a 3 times 1 is 3 on the bottom. Let's deal with x's. X to the third, x to the fourth. So I've got 1 extra x on the bottom. And now for y's. Okay, this requires maybe, well, actually, or does it? This y on the top and that y on the bottom can reduce. That leaves me with just this y to the negative third, which I'm going to move upstairs and make it a y to the positive third. And now everything has been dealt with. On this next one, heaven help me if you do anything more than that. Because this is all to the power of 0, you don't care what's in here. It's going to end up being 1 in the end. So paying attention to those 0 exponents can sometimes save you a lot of time and trouble. Okay, let's wrap things up here. Now these two, these require you to use all the properties at once. This is as nasty as they get. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of fun though, in its own way. So here's what we got. Let's deal with this set of parentheses on the top first. We're also going to simplify the bottom here. So on the top, I'm going to have 2 to the negative fourth, x to the second to the negative fourth, multiply those, power to a power. It's going to be x to the negative 8. Y to the third to the negative fourth, power to a power, multiply those exponents, so it looks like that. Woo. On the bottom, 2 times the 2 gives me 4. x to the negative fourth times x to the second is x to the negative second. And then it's y to the negative third. Now there's several things that are making this a little bit redonkulous. And one of them is all of these negative exponents going on. So tell you what, I'm going to focus on rewriting it so we don't have those negative exponents. Let's first deal with this 2. So 2 to the negative fourth. That's the same as 2 to the positive fourth downstairs. So that 2 to the fourth moves down below. This x to the negative 8 moves down below and becomes x to the positive 8. This y to the negative 12 moves down below, becomes y to the positive 12. This 4 stays where it is. This x to the negative second moves upstairs, becomes x to the positive second, and the y to the third stays where it is. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Let's deal with the numbers first. So 2 to the fourth times 4 should be 64. So number-wise, that and that multiply together to give us a 64 down below. Now, as far as x's go, I've got x to the 8th on the bottom, x to the 2nd on the top. So I have 6 extra x's down below. And for my y's, 12 plus 3 is going to give me a 15 down below. Moral of the story, keep track of your work. Keep track of everything, and you should be able to do okay. And then lastly, let's see what we've got. X to the 0, that's just the number 1, so we don't worry about it. Let's take care of these parentheses here. So 4 to the 3rd, that's 64. Y to the 3rd, power to a power, multiply those exponents, times 2x to the 4th, and this y, I'm actually going to move down below as y to the positive first. But this y to the 2nd, we're going to move upstairs as y to the positive 2nd. Okay, let's wrap things up. 64 times 2, that's 128. X to the 4th, there's no other x's. As far as y's go, I've got y to the 9th times y to the 2nd, that's y to the 11th. Divide one of those y's away, we're left with y to the 10th. And there they be. So keep track of things. You should end up in good shape. Make sure you check your answers as you go. And as you have questions, check in with a classmate and check in with your teachers.